I've got something strange to show you today. I've got 4 Crossfire receivers here, 2, I think they're Nano Pros, and 2 Nano Diversities. And I've got it hooked up to my bench power supply, which is right over there. And I've just got some alligator clips running over, going to the ground, and the input voltage on the little Nano Diversity receiver. So let's power it up real quick. And I'm just use the power control software that comes with that bench power supply. I'm going to change the voltage from 16.8 down to 5, and we'll go ahead and switch that on. Now I'll try to zoom this in a little here, and you can see the receiver is powered up. Oops. There we go. You can see the receiver's powered up. I hope that's in focus, because my eyes are not. So this is liable to be bad today. Eyes have really been blurry the past day or so. So we want to put this in bind mode. So let me try to push this button momentarily. There we go. It had just been powered up. So there it is. If we can move this antenna out of the way, we can see it flashing green, that it's in ready to bind. So I'm going to go over and power up the radio, and we'll bind to it. So I've got the Micro TX2 connected to USB. I'm just going to open TBS Agent Desktop here. We'll go in here and we'll tell it to bind, please. And it says binding. Well, that receiver's been in the drawer here for a while, so it's not yet been upgraded to version 6.19. And here we come up on 95%, transferring that firmware into the receiver. And now you'll see over here the green light is flashing quickly. The receiver's flashing 2 green pulses while it's taking the firmware update from the transmitter. And you can see over here on the screen, binding okay. Okay, so if we go back now, you can see that receiver. We'll put it in 12 channel mode, telemetry on. That's about it. Rest I can pretty much leave for defaults right now. It's not hooked to a platform. 619. Okay, it's bound to that transmitter. I'm going to do that same thing real quick to a second receiver. Don't need to show it on the screen, I don't think. Now I've got a second Nano Diversity there hooked up to the bench power supply. I'm going to apply power to it and then put it into binding mode. and we'll program it up with the firmware. So there we go. We have two nano diversity receivers bound to that transmitter. You can see there it is with its solid green light on, signifying it's bound. Now I can quickly take the connector loose right here and hook it to this receiver. Well, let me turn off the power from the bench power supply first, and just quickly move this over and power the bench power supply back up, and there we have another solid green light. Both of those receivers are bound to that transmitter. Now watch this. Here comes the wild part. We're going to come back over here. We're going to go into that micro TX V2 into the radio settings, and we're going to come down to encryption. We're going to turn that encryption on. And now we'll power up that receiver again. And no great surprise, it's no longer bound. But I'm going to go ahead and power down that receiver. I'm actually doing this across the table. I'm going to power down that receiver, and when I power it back up, I'm going to put it into bind mode. Just a quick press of the little button on it. It's not a big deal at all. Come back over here, and we're going to rebind to that receiver again. They're doing their thing, and they are now bound again. This time they are bound with encryption. You can see here now we have a solid green light on that receiver stating that it's bound with the transmitter with encryption. Now I'm going to switch the two receivers around again by turning off the power. Switching the connector. And repowering up. The receiver is no longer bound because of the encryption. So I'll put it in binding mode. There you go. Now it's in binding mode. We'll go back across the room and bind to that second transmitter, receiver again. That's the second diversity. There we go. We're bound. Gotcha. And it's showing both of those little receivers right now. But the important thing here is that we're bound to those two receivers with encryption on. So I'm going to jump off the computer here, put my transmitter back in my radio, and show you across the room the real magic. So here's the real magic. I am bound with my radio to this receiver. No problem whatsoever. Honest. But watch this. When I power down and switch over to this receiver, I'm just going to leave the radio the way it is. No, I'm going to turn the radio
still connected.
off. I'll turn the radio off. You'll see the connection was dropped. It went to a red. Okay, now I'll turn the receiver, this first receiver, back on. Then I'll turn the radio on. No, that's not the exact proper order.
Manual mode off.
Whoops. No, the receiver just fell off the table. But look what's going on. That's still a red light. When encryption is on, my current experience is you only bind to one receiver. I tried it with 4 or 5 in the platforms behind me. I moved up to the 6.19 firmware yesterday in their receivers. And this is 5 and 6 or 7 and 8 different receivers I have tried this experiment with. As long as I am unencrypted, I can bind to several receivers. I expect the 5 behind me, 6 and 7. I expect the 5 behind me, if I take the encryption off the transmitter, to be right back bound, ready to fly those 5 different models, under 5 different models inside this radio for differences in control functions. But when encryption is enabled, my current experience is, if I wanted to fly those 5 models behind me, one after the other, I would have to bind to the next model. After I flew the first one, I'd have to bind to the second one, fly it, bind to the third one and fly it, bind to the fourth one and fly it, bind to the fifth one and fly it. If I wanted to do it all over again, I'd have to go back and bind to the first one and start through the sequence again. So I'm going to put in a ticket with Crossfire, TBS, and ask them, I kind of assume, this is that good military grade encryption that we didn't know we wanted so badly. I thought I wanted a good Mavlink connection, but no, they said I wanted the military grade encryption. And that messes with my multi-bind. I used to take these 2 radios, the other radio I have and the other Crossfire transmitter I had, and I could put them side by side at the field in case something happened to the first one, either the radio, the transmitter, or either or both or whatever. I could pick up the second radio, turn it on, and be right back controlling that aircraft. That was the beauty of multi-bind. I don't mind so much that multi-bind is broken as the fact that it seems like I'm only bound to the last. I'll switch these back real quick. And I'm not going to cycle the radio this time. I don't think it really matters. With encryption on, I'm only bound to the last receiver that transmitter was bound to. Bink, green light, bound. They're working perfectly together. Is there something I don't understand here? Anybody shed any more light on this? Because, I want to go into my radio and bring up my models and just flip to a different model. Select that model, and I'm ready to fly that model without rebinding and stuff. And I can do that without encryption on. And I can sort of see why with encryption on, you can only bind to one receiver at a time. The timing, whatever the algorithm is for the encryption, I guess is established at that time between that transmitter and that receiver, and it's only good as long as a second receiver had that same algorithm in it. It seems like it would follow the encryption from the radio. I don't know. We'll have to see what pans out here. This may be a temporary thing that's fixed in the next version of Crossfire software that comes out within a week. Who knows? It's just something I've seen in my equipment. So technically, I'm going to go back and turn encryption off in the radio so that I can connect to the 5 airplanes and this 6th and 7th, 8th and 9th receiver that I have right here on the bench. I didn't really do anything with these. That's 2 Crossfire Nano Pros there. I'm sure they would do exactly the same thing because I did this experiment with the airplanes behind me yesterday. In order to make this video today, I didn't want to just put all that out on the table, including the big old Sky Hunter, which is one of the Crossfire platforms. So it was just easier to use these spare receivers that I have on the table here. So I'm open to any discussion, but from my standpoint right now, it looks like you can bind the transmitter to multiple receivers with encryption off, but you can only bind it to one receiver at a time, period, with encryption on. And if I'm mistaken, please, by all means, let me know. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.